if you've got real imposter syndrome and you're sitting next to an idiot with confidence, right? They are your absolute nemesis, because they're not even going to notice that you've got imposter syndrome, or they'll think they can add value to what you're saying.
You're listening to Give Yourself Some Leeway with me, your host, Eugene Lee. Over the last 5 years, through my burnout experience, podcasting and coaching, I have learned a lot about burnout recovery as a high achiever. What to do, what not to do, and the common mistakes that many people, like myself, make along the way. This podcast is dedicated to help you break the burnout cycle, optimize your life for peak performance when you need it most, and rediscovering how to truly enjoy living again. That's the key to your growth and success. It's great to have you here on Give Yourself Some Leeway. And one thing that I always like to start off with coaches is I like to find out where they got that spark, that vision to get into coaching in the first place. So where did that start for you?
Okay, so it came from, I was working, or have worked, I had a 30-year career in Formula One motor racing, and as the companies sort of try to drag themselves into the modern world, my company in particular then started a mentoring program for the university graduates and for the new starters, because people came into the company with a job to do, but what they didn't realize was there were, 1,500 other roles within the company. So we set up this mentoring program, and that's where I learned the background of coaching and the very, very simple basics of it. And obviously the more I did, and the results I got from it, helping people be empowered to move and find new jobs, or to leave the company altogether and start their own companies and things like that, I suddenly thought, this is a pretty cool thing to be doing. I enjoy doing this, and I found out I was pretty good at it as well. So the natural progression when I was given redundancy a few years, 3 years back now, was, right, well, I've got these qualifications that the company has very kindly given me. Obviously I made sure that any training I did was transferable at the time. So I had this portfolio of stuff that I could walk away with, and it's like one or two events stuck in my mind of people that I'd helped, made me realize that this is what I want to do. I at one time I realized I was a compulsive helper, and so actually by learning to coach and becoming a coach helped me to wind that back in, which was brilliant for my sanity. Meant I served people better, and subsequently, when I had the opportunity, it was like, this is it. I don't want to work for anybody else. I want to work for me and my clients only. So here I am. This is what I'm doing.
Brilliant. And let's say when you were in the Formula One industry, was coaching, let's say, a popular thing? Let's say life coaching popular in the Formula One industry? Absolutely
not. No. It was then, and I only got out of it a few years ago, and it's still a very, no matter what they'd like you to believe, it's still a very macho hero culture. Okay, and so no, coaching wasn't a thing at all, because certainly, I can only speak from my experience, but you were paid a rather good wage to do a job that you were really good at. So actually coaching you to get better at that job really wasn't in the company's best interest. Okay, it was only when things started changing, when, I don't know, there was, people would come to a company and say, what's in it for me, rather than, oh, bright lights, I want to do this, and when people were starting to become more informed, the company, and to be fair, when the company started realizing that maybe they had to look after people's mental health and things like that they started to put it into place. And I think it's still like that to a certain degree, so no, really, the thought of coaching staff wasn't and probably isn't a big thing still.
Yeah, like I mean, the main reason I asked was like because beyond like the strategy of the sport, and let's say it was just it's it's a mental game at the end of the day is what I
Mm,
find. So
mm,
I was like, I would have thought that mindset coaching, it might not even have had that title, but it was
mm.
probably I thought it might have been going on in the background anyway. Or it would, maybe it was to some
Yeah.
degree, it just didn't have a name put to it.
Maybe to a certain degree, but certainly a lot of my experience was we don't have time for that, right? And especially now when there's 20 plus races in a year, teams are on a budget restriction. You're there to do your job as well as you possibly can, and stick with it, right? And no one else has got time to hold your hand because they're all too busy doing their jobs properly, So it becomes quite it's a razor focused sort of situation where you get in there, you do your job, you keep your head down, you do this, you've done your bit right, and you've done your bit well, and you rely on everyone else to do that. But there's no sort of soft edges, if you like, where you go to someone, are you sure? Are you able to do your job okay? It's just like, I've done my bit. Come on, you got to join in now. So it
Yeah.
makes you tough.
Yeah. I suppose then that questioning as well, I think that leads very well into imposter syndrome.
Mm,
It gets you to question yourself, am I able for this?
definitely, yeah. I can remember vividly the first day I walked into one of our pit garages, and Barcelona, it would have been perhaps, I don't know, 2019, something like that. I can't remember exactly, but I remember walking in, and we were testing, so it was before 2019. And the guy with me, he said, right, well, this is your car, that's my car, I'm doing this, that, and the other. And I didn't know, I'd never been in that environment before. And I was expected to know how to speak to all the mechanics on the car. I was expected to know how to analyze the data on the car. I was expected to know when things were going to happen. And I was like, this, I don't know whether it was, at that point, I think I was far more rabbit in headlights than imposter syndrome, right? Because I walked in there thinking, I know what I am doing, I know my job, but I don't know what the rest of this is at all, at all. I didn't even know, Eugene, I didn't even know what time we would stop for lunch. It was like that. It was like, I don't know what happens once the circuit opens at 9 o'clock. Then what? No idea. And so in that regard, there was no time for imposter syndrome. It was just like, you're in it now, get on with it. But on the other hand, of course, I'm working with the race team, ostensibly, who you see on telly every other week, who still, to even the guys in the factory, are like demigods, right? They're the ones, and they've got that attitude. They believe that in themselves. And so I'm a little bit. I'll give you an example. I was too scared to go and ask for advice from someone that I knew from when my brother went to school. Right, I knew this guy, but I was too scared to go and approach him and ask him for some, where do I find such and such? And it's like, and that's like, when I look back now, it's just bloody ridiculous, right? But it's just absolute overload. And so there is a degree of, I'm not meant to be here. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And notwithstanding the drivers and people like that around that you see on the telly every weekend, and notwithstanding any of that, I really had to ground myself and remind myself that actually I was just in an unusual environment, still doing my job. And very quickly, and I mean very quickly, certainly by the end of day 2, I was aware that nobody else in the garage knew what I knew about my stuff, right? And so that helps you get over that sort of like fish out of water kind of thing, right? as long as you, okay, as long as I ask this guy over here when I can get on the car to put my stuff on it, he's not going to ask me what I'm doing with it. He's not going to question me. They just accept, like I said just now, they just accept that you know what you're doing, and that's a great leveler, actually, because it gets out of your head straight away. A lot of imposter syndrome is your head second guessing what's going to happen, right? As soon as you realize that nobody else knows what you're going to do, it levels the playing field completely.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. Like, imposter syndrome is you second guessing yourself on repeat, on loop. Yeah.
I think that's the thing, on loop. If I hadn't learned those lessons in that, the first time I went away, it was a 4-day test. So, if I hadn't learned in those 4 days that I was going to walk away from that circuit knowing that the next time I went, I was going to be one of the blokes, right? Then that would have then led into imposter syndrome, because I would have gone to the next event and the next event and the next event, still thinking I'm the kid here, and they're either going to rip me apart for being a bit soft, or they're going to stitch me up, or and actually getting rid of all of that helped me realize that, I was just nervous. I wasn't, the imposter syndrome wasn't really a thing. I was just like, as anyone would be in any environment, right? You get thrown into something new, you've got a right to be nervous. In fact, there'd be something wrong if you weren't. But very quickly getting past that I'm not meant to be here stage, that was the key. I think that sort of, I guess I'm lucky that I've never really suffered from imposter syndrome for any length of time.
Yeah, I think, sorry. I think you've covered something really important there. The difference between you being nervous in that situation when you first started and actual imposter syndrome. And sometimes people have a hard time trying to differentiate both of those, whether they're actually just nervous in a certain situation, or is this a recurring thing? Is this imposter syndrome?
Yeah, absolutely. And to anyone who's listening, if you're going into a new situation, please be nervous, because it's going to keep you on top of your game, right? If you went in nonchalant and Jack the lad, I didn't care, you're actually not going to do so well. You need those nerves. But in terms of, imposter syndrome gets bandied around as a label a lot, and rightly or wrongly, I think that there's a need for some people to have to be able to explain with a common vernacular how they feel. Okay, and so and I can remember this. I was chatting to a guy not that long ago, last year, and he'd self-published a book, and he was going on a tour to promote this book, and he was coming to a town near me. So I said, "Oh, I'll come along." And he said, "Oh, yeah, it'd be nice to have someone there, like a familiar face. We'll have a drink beforehand." Like, I get terrible imposter syndrome before I go on. And I said, "Really? You get terrible imposter?" Yeah. Oh. I said, "Well, tell me what that feels like." And he said, "Well, I stand in the wings and I just I look out and there's maybe, when we're not talking about big venue, 200 people." He said, 200 people there. And I feel that, I feel that I just so nervous. I said, "Well, so you don't get imposter syndrome. Okay. You're not standing there thinking, I am not worthy of being here or anything like that. What you are is nervous, right? And you're nervous because you want to give your audience good value for money. Okay. And this guy, as it happens, he's on TV a fair bit. So his audience has come because they've seen who he is. They already know him, right? So, and he's not turning up as it. And I said to him, "You're not turning up as anyone else. You're turning up as who you are. And that's who these people are paid to come and see, right? And these people," and I pointed out to him, "these people deserve to come and pay to see you talk. right? And I could see him sort of, oh, I never really thought about that, but it's just nerves, right? They can't hear what you're going to say. They don't know what you're going to say. They can't hear what you're thinking, rather, not hear what you're going to say. They can't hear what you're thinking, so they don't know what you're planning on saying next. So you can't say the wrong thing. And yeah, they've paid because they want to pay to come and see you. So actually, you've got an audience of 200 people all on your side from day one, from the moment you walk out. And he's like, oh, yeah. Well, I feel much better about that, right? That's not imposter syndrome, but that was the label he'd given it, you know. And that's a dangerous game to do that. You know, I believe that imposter syndrome is a behavior. It's a behavior, a characteristic almost of the way people behave. It's not, I don't know, nervousness. What is it? It's an emotion, maybe, or something like that. Imposter syndrome, you can see repetitive behavior traits from people, right? Because yeah, a syndrome, right? It is a thing. It's a real issue rather than just nerves.
Yeah, definitely struck a chord there. When it comes to imposter syndrome in the workplace,
Mm-hmm.
are there, let's say, common characteristics that you might see in people that, you know, to identify imposter syndrome, whether you're experiencing it yourself or you might see it in your colleagues?
Yes, I believe so. It's been identified that there are sort of like various traits, if you like. But bearing in mind, these aren't exclusive to people only who have imposter syndrome, right? They could just be the way some people behave. But things like you'll have the person who's the expert on the subject matter expert, okay, knows everything about everything and won't be challenged, okay. And there may genuinely be, there are some people who've got brains the size of planets, right? And they genuinely are experts and they genuinely can't be, but there are people who you know aren't that smart, but behave as if they are because they're hiding behind it. And this is what people do with imposter syndrome. They put a smoke screen up, right? So you got the expert, the person who can't be challenged, who will always have a comeback, a reason, an explanation for why something is like something is. Or you've got the perfectionist, okay? And the perfectionist is great because what they're doing is they're using delaying tactics for finishing a job, okay? They will over plan. They'll spend, 95% of their project time planning, and then the rest of the other 5% not achieving anything, okay? They'll always push the deadlines. They'll always be late on something because it's just not quite right yet. And actually what that is, that's a fear of letting something go, because in their heads, they're telling themselves, I am not worthy of putting my name behind this, whatever it is. Or a little bit like the perfectionist is like the superhero, if you like, right? I've got this, stand back, this is mine, and doesn't let anyone have a look in, okay? They're the person who can be a little bit condescending, maybe. You stand aside, small person, I've got this one, and you know these people, right? We've seen them as a combination everywhere you go. And again, the superhero just cannot accept that they need anyone else to help them. And the same with a trait like the soloist, if you like. They're another one. I'm going to do all this. I'm not even going to tell you what I'm doing. I'm just going to do it all. I'm going to keep it all to myself, and I'm not going to share my notes with anyone. I'm not going to share this. I'm not going to share that, because all they've got is this. And all these people, what they're doing is they're smoke screening through a fear of being found out. Right? They don't believe that they're the subject matter expert in the room. And the last one, the natural genius, right? Again, a little bit like the expert. He, she, them, they are just the person who knows everything about everything, okay? Or if they don't know, they'll damn well go and find out. And they don't want you're not going to tell them. They'll go and find out in their own way how they need to find stuff out. And it's all about hiding behind this cloak, just putting the shield up. I should imagine most people who are listening or watching this will at some point have sat in a room with people with one or more of those character traits. And if you think back to that time when you were there, what were these people really doing? They were just isolating themselves, right? And by isolating yourself, you're beyond question. You're beyond attack, because you've put this barrier up that you've told everybody else in the room, I don't need you. So you've become aloof, okay? So in your head, you've elevated your status above the people in the room. And to the people in the room, they say, I'm not even gonna ask them, because of their attitude. I'm not even going to offer them help or anything like that. So no one ever gets to show this person up, which is this person, the imposter syndrome sufferer's biggest fear is being shown up. So they built this big wall about themselves, so no one can talk to them, and there's no risk of that.
Yeah, and I think it also helps if you're experiencing imposter syndrome yourself to be able to identify with these character traits.
Oh, totally.
Sometimes it does help to go down that rabbit hole and look at these different character traits and be like, which one am I? And I'm sure there's like a list of questions where you can like figure out which character trait are you. And even by identifying it, as you said, people wrongly using the word imposter syndrome and using that to shape their identity and be like, oh, I just experienced imposter syndrome, and being taken up the wrong way. The same with if you were to take on the person or the identity of the character trait. You'd be like, oh, I'm just a natural genius. This is what I do, and this is why I experienced imposter syndrome. Like, some people tend to latch onto that identity and just go with it and be like, okay, this is me. This is how I am, and I can't change anything about it. It's just who I am. I'm going to always live with imposter syndrome. Whereas, for their own sake and for their own health, they're better off identifying it, seeing it as like a diagnosis. If you go to the doctor and you don't feel well, or there's something wrong with you, and the doctor says, oh, it's because you have chickenpox, you're not going to be like, great, I have chickenpox. This is going to be like my identity the rest of life. I'm just Mr. or Mrs. Chickenpox, and that's my identity for the rest of my life. You're going to be like, okay, no, this is something that I just have to deal with, and let's say take medication or something, and rest and recovery, and I won't have chickenpox in the next couple of weeks, and I don't have to worry about it. Hopefully I won't have to worry about it again. And the same with identifying your character trait with imposter syndrome. You'd be like, okay, I'm a soloist. I don't like asking people for help. No, I don't like people coming to me and offering help, because it makes me feel like I can't do the job on my own, and that I'm just not competent to finish that job. And next thing you realize is they're like, maybe allowing someone to help me is helping them feel more valued as a colleague or as an associate in my life. Maybe they feel like they get more fulfillment by maybe helping out in the task, even though I know I could probably do it by myself. And even just by increasing that awareness and kind of flipping the script a bit, instead of being like, I can do this, if someone tries to help me, I won't go straight on the defensive and be like, no, I can do this on my own. You kind of flip the script and go, it's actually doing them a favor, or it's of value to them to help me out on this task. And if they offer to help on this task, maybe I can teach them how I do the task to my full potential, and help train them. And it's about flipping the script to get out of that imposter syndrome cycle and use it to your benefit. And maybe, let's say, by identifying that character trait, you can overcome your imposter syndrome as a result. But again, it's about people trying to get people into that mindset, that it's not about finding your character trait and using that as your identity going forward in life. It's about finding where you stand now and how you can improve from there.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was thinking, like, when you said, like, the chicken pox analogy, the great thing with chicken pox or a broken leg or an illness, you go to your doctor, right? You can see that, right? It's anybody can see when you've got a physical noticeable illness, right? I've got chicken. How do you know you got chickens? I'm covered in spots, right? How do you know you got imposter syndrome? And until you realize, until you see it. And I think you hit on a really, really good and quite an important point there, is that if you've recognized that someone is leaning into one of these traits too much, okay, and there is someone who, the soloist, to use your analogy, is like there's someone who's keeping everything to themselves, who's the gatekeeper and what have you. Everybody loves to be asked to help. Okay, so if you do spin it around the other way, exactly as you said, if you've noticed that someone, in your opinion, could do with just letting go a little bit, just opening up a little bit, what better way to do it? Well, how better to empower someone than to elevate their status, right? But not how they've just done it themselves, but you actually give them that elevated status. And you say, buddy, you know what you're talking about. I could really use your help here. And yet they will come and they will help. And then the trick then, trick's a wrong word because that sounds disingenuous, doesn't it? But to really make it work for the person you're trying to help then is you've got to then just slowly get them on side so they trust you, and then you can start to say, actually, then they'll see for themselves, rather than you saying, haha, I told you so. They'll see for themselves that working together is better than working alone, okay? Or it's okay not to know stuff, right? Because despite what some people would try and tell you, we don't all know everything, right? In fact, none of us know everything. And that's why you work in teams, right? That's why when I said earlier about, going to the garage and at the end of day 2 or whatever, I was considered to be the subject matter expert. That's why I was there, right? I wasn't there because they had a spare seat on the bus, and to actually to be able to allow people who have put this wall up to realize that they can work with other people, or they can offload onto other people without fear of ridicule, I think is, it's a little bit of a balance that you have to do, because it's a people who get their heads in this bucket, if you like, it's difficult for them to get it out.
Yeah. Just going to throw this out there, but do you think that there are any positive impacts to, like, having imposter syndrome? Is there any, let's say, positive effect of having imposter syndrome?
Gosh. I think it probably depends on how it represents itself with you. One thing for sure, imposter syndrome will do is it will keep you safe, right? And if you are given to playing safe, it'll keep you there for sure. So it depends what you want, I think, as well. But you only presumably, I don't know, I'm not a psychologist, I'm just like, presumably you would only get imposter syndrome if you have ambition, okay? Because if you've got no ambition, if you've got no desire to elevate your status, to see something through, you don't need imposter syndrome, because there's nothing to give it to you, okay? There's no reason for you to feel less than anybody else. So I think, can it be a good thing? I think, yeah, for sure. It'll, like I say, it'll keep you safe. It'll also probably stop you doing something really stupid. Okay. I don't know, if you didn't have that level of caution almost that imposter syndrome will give you, you'd think you can do anything, right? And we can't do anything, right? Otherwise, we'd all be queuing up to tightrope across Niagara Falls, right? Because we all think we could do it. Okay, so you need that. You need a level of caution to keep you safe. And sometimes maybe it will give you that second chance to think about something, just to take a deep breath and say, and just to reevaluate, is this really what I want to do? You know, I think that could possibly be an upside to it. But whether that would just come as a byproduct anyway, you know, if you don't tackle it, if you have imposter syndrome, you don't tackle it, what's going to happen? You're not going to do anything, right? Because you will never complete that task. You'll never ask for help.
Yeah, I think that was kind of similar to my angle, is that when it comes to imposter syndrome, it's kind of a common trait to people who are high achievers or creatives. Let's say if you're in music or art, if you're a perfectionist, that's where imposter syndrome comes in, where you feel like, I'm not good enough. This project isn't good enough. I'm not qualified to pursue this goal, pursue this career, to give advice on this topic, give advice on this subject, to mentor someone, or to coach someone. It's where all these self-doubts come into play. And it's like, if people were always overconfident and they went head first into everything, yes, it can be to their detriment. They sometimes, failure is the best way to learn. But sometimes, yes, you are taking that risk. Some people might jump head first into something without planning or anything, and next thing they either put themselves in danger, they might put others in danger, and they might hurt other people, let's say relationships with other people as a result too, because the imposter syndrome, in a way, it does make you take a step back and reevaluate, which is a positive effect of imposter syndrome, as far as I can see. That, just from my perspective, that if I was to look back at any time that I felt imposter syndrome, even when I first started the podcast, sometimes when I was doing episodes, I take a step back and be like, am I qualified to talk about this? And if imposter syndrome didn't set in, I probably would have waffled for hours, talking complete and utter waffle, and be like, okay, this isn't going to help anyone at the end of the day. But I was going to be like, I recorded an hour, I'm going to throw it out there and see what happens. Whereas when I had the imposter syndrome, and I was like, that self-doubt set in, I was like, I'm not qualified to talk about this subject. It made me take a step back and go, right, I'm going to spend 2 or 3 days researching this topic until I feel confident to talk about it, and then structure an episode until I feel confident that this is something that I might want to hear. And then I'd record it and publish it, and then I was more confident in it. And as a result, because of that imposter syndrome and self-doubt kind of hold me back, being like, I'm not qualified to do this. But at the same time, me reevaluating and saying, how would I feel qualified to do this? It produced a much higher quality episode, or at least a project that I was more proud of at the end of the day. So I think, in a way, it is helpful to have imposter syndrome to some degree. I think for me, for a long time, it was, you're not qualified to do this. You don't have any certification to do podcasting or anything. I was like, is there certification to do podcasting? I don't know, but I don't have it, so I wouldn't know. And it was literally that thought and that over analysis the whole time going through my head. And next thing, it was just when I took the leap forward and just said, like, just do it, see how it goes, see if you like it, and if you don't like it, look, reevaluate and improve next time. And it was again finding out where my let's say what was the underlying emotion of that imposter syndrome, and addressing that. So in me going off on a tangent again, but it's to just bring it to a fine point, is that imposter syndrome is an effective tool. Let's say it's okay, maybe it's not a tool you want to have in your arsenal, but it can be used to your advantage. At times it gets you to take a step back and reevaluate, rather than going head first into everything. And and again, some people, it does work for some people, and they just learn from their failures. But I think when it comes to high achievers and creatives, they feel like they don't want to waste their time. The first time they might put a lot of effort and sacrifice into something, and they don't want to feel like that it was a complete failure that they can't come back from. And sometimes they actually appreciate taking that time to plan and reevaluate and then perform. So yeah, in a nutshell, I think having a little bit of imposter syndrome in the back of your mind, that makes you take a step back and reevaluate for a second, but don't let it overwhelm you and stop you from taking action. I think that's where the fine line is.
That's certainly when it stops you doing something, is when you lose, without doubt. Interesting that I think you gave two scenarios there. One which I would almost question, was it imposter syndrome, was when you were saying, if you've been wanting to talk around a subject and then thought, I'm not qualified to talk around this subject. Is that imposter syndrome, or is that you realizing that you don't have enough information to talk around it knowledgeably? Right? Whereas when you said about when you thought about setting the podcast up, I'm not qualified to do a podcast. Says who? Right? You've got an opinion, you're qualified. You've got a camera, you've got a microphone, you're qualified. Yeah. Whether, and so I think you got two very different situations there. Right? There are people hosting podcasts who are household names. Okay. They will give you imposter syndrome because you know who they are and they're doing a slick job of it. And they've got X millions of listeners and they've got deals with Spotify and Amazon and stuff like that. Right? That I get it. Yeah. Am I qualified to do it? Am I the right person to do it? But do I know enough about what I'm about to talk to? I would say is caution and not imposter syndrome. And that kept you safe though.
Yeah, that is a good way of looking at it. And again, I think that just brings back to trying to identify the traits. I was like, what's the underlying emotion behind it, and what's stopping you? So yeah, to be that is a good point. Maybe it was just my caution holding me back, and being like, here, Eugene, hold back a second. Don't follow through on this just yet. That is an interesting point.
And that was well placed, right? Because there's nothing worse than an idiot with confidence, right? And if you'd gone gung-ho into talking about something you didn't know something about, that's exactly how you would have come across, right? And these people get found out. And this is what actually this is. I use the term because we used to use it a lot in my job, idiot with confidence, like, because when somebody, the saying, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. When somebody, it's the opposite of imposter syndrome, totally the opposite. When someone's seen what you do and think, yeah, I could do that, right? And they go and they screw it all up. But they're the people who are perhaps the biggest threat to people with imposter syndrome, and they are the ones who would probably, in a situation, if you've got real imposter syndrome and you're sitting next to someone, an idiot with confidence, right? They are your absolute nemesis, because they're not even going to notice that you've got imposter syndrome, or they'll think they can add value to what you're saying, right? So if you imagine yourself in a room with a guy with an imposter syndrome on the left-hand side and an idiot with confidence on your right-hand side, man, you've got a job to do to keep the two of them like a level balance. So again, imposter syndrome will keep you safe from these people, right? Because you can just shut them down. You will just shut them down. You'll turn away from them. But in the long run, whether it helps, I don't know.
Yeah, as soon as you said that, I was there like, I've been in so many situations where, let's say, where I feel that I'm not qualified to talk about this topic, but next thing, some idiot starts speaking up and starts spewing out random. I was like, oh my God. I was like, I know for a fact that's not true, but they speak with such conviction that everyone believes them. And next thing, I'm just like, and then you try to call them out. I was like, I know that's not true, but I don't feel qualified to talk about this topic to correct you because I'm not sure if my facts are true or if they're validated. So I'd hold back and be like, okay, I'm not going to speak up because I can't validate what I want to say. But they can speak with complete conviction about simply what they believe, or sometimes they don't even believe it. They just like, they let their mouth do the talking and they don't even think about what they say.
Yeah.
And that I think that's very dangerous. And I suppose that's coming from me, where I'll always like to have some reference or backup to what I say, whereas some people just like to speak their mind freely.
Yeah, and I think to look at that kind of people is going to be the sort of person who will stand in a bar and tell a story slightly too loudly, right, and throw away a few facts about this, that, and the other, and it's probably the center of the laughter in a room. And you, as a cautious person, you wouldn't be doing that, because, like you say, you don't want to be found out as the idiot after the event, right? Okay, so and I've seen this happen. I've seen people give talks and use quotes during motivational talks that, when I've gone home and checked them out, are utter rubbish. Okay, and you sort of think then, oh, I've got no comeback. Right? And so what that does, and here's the thing, this is where I'm going with this, is that as a rational, cautious person, you've checked those stats, right? I'm not going to repeat that line that guy said, because actually it turns out that X, Y, and Z is a load of rubbish. Okay, and so you let it go, right? But if you're prone to imposter syndrome, again, you're going to sit there and you're going to say, why did he think I was going to suck that up? What does he take me for? Right? He thinks that he can get better. He thinks he can feed any old shit at me and I will take it. And so your internal monologue starts straight away, right? And it starts with, he knew more, that even though deep down in your brain that he's an absolute idiot, right? Your imposter syndrome is saying, he is more popular than me. He knows more than I did. Yeah. He can engage an audience better than I can. Okay, and it just starts this churn. Okay, the person who, I'm sure, I'd like to think anyway, you being human, that there will have been times when you've walked away from a situation, you've gone, I can't believe I said that out loud, right? You replay a thing, you think, oh, and the fact is, probably whoever you said it to couldn't even remember you said something, and it didn't matter. But because you question it, okay, because you've got that logic. Now, the idiot with confidence wouldn't question that it said something stupid, right? The guy with imposter syndrome would question it silently and constantly, okay, until it became them. And there's your danger. And you were saying, about how do you recognize it and things like that. Ask yourself, if you ask yourself, if you know that you've been in a situation like that you've compromised yourself, just ask yourself why. Okay, I've got this thing. I don't know. It was learned from when I was working in a quality environment. We would, a simple tool. You'll get to the root of the problem if you ask why 5 times. Okay, do it the same with yourself. If you think, oh my God, I said something stupid, right? Why did you say something stupid? Well, I was excited. Why were you excited? Well, I got carried away by these people. Why did you get carried away? And eventually you'll come right down to the base level of, it was regrettable, it's done, it doesn't matter. Okay. If you ask someone with imposter syndrome, why did you behave like that? Why did you behave like a superhero? Why did you burn yourself out when someone else could have helped you? And they will have such a long list of reasons why. Okay. And it will go on forever and ever and ever. And if you ask the idiot with confidence, why did you say that unchecked fact? Well, it doesn't matter. And they'll have a really short list. Okay. So the person with, I wish there was a term for someone with, there must be a term for someone with imposter syndrome, but they will continually be checking themselves. Why did I say it? And they won't come up. Here's the other thing, they won't come up, in my opinion. Okay, and let's put this out there. I'm not being an idiot with confidence now. I'm just giving you my opinion. I hope that they will come up with what they will tell you are reasons for their behavior, but actually they're excuses. And I think that's what sort of they will validate their behavior with excuses.
Yeah, that's a yeah. I get where you're coming from.
Yeah. I mean, by all means, yeah, like I say, I'm not the expert. This is just what I've
Yeah,
realized.
from experience, yeah.
Yeah. And most often, the more threatened they feel, the bigger those excuses get.
And when you think of the workplace, there are definitely certain roles, let's say, where you can see that more prominent.
Mm-hmm.
Like it can come out in people in certain levels of the organization, and you think for a second, you think, okay, maybe is it a power complex or something? But it could just be their imposter syndrome taking hold, or it could be an overconfidence. And then again, it's hard to, sometimes it can be hard to differentiate whether they're coming from a point of overconfidence in their role, or are they trying to compensate for their imposter syndrome in that role. And they're either trying to overcome it or to mask it.
Yeah, and I think that's where you then take half a step back and you give it time, okay, to sort itself out. If you've ever been unfortunate enough to have been promoted into a position that you weren't ready for, you'll know exactly how that feels, right? You'll know that, oh my God, I've now got this responsibility, or I've got to do this task. So you come back with a little bit of bullishness, and you see new young managers maybe ordering people about, have a complete personality change from how they were, because something in them is telling them this is how they have to not be questioned about what they're doing, and I've seen some brilliant people promoted above, maybe twice above their abilities, and it's the wrong way to reward someone for doing something right, because actually what you do is you set this trail of destruction off in them, that they either recognize quickly, someone goes up to them and says, can you help me, and they work together and it comes out, or they just don't stay in that role for long.
And exactly on that point there, it's many times people get the promotion and they might go up a level or two, but they're put in that role and it's like, oh, you were great as, let's say, a junior manager, we're going to move you up senior or above. But they don't get any training or anything. No. They just get landed in that role, and they're like, just learn on the job. Hey, you were great as junior manager, let's see how you take this on, take on this new role.
Yeah.
And next thing they find, they're over their heads. Maybe they enjoyed the position that they were in, their level of responsibility, and they excelled at that. But next thing, when you put them straight into a higher role, they're like, okay, now I'm overwhelmed, and now I'm struggling to keep up my responsibilities. I'm not, and then it's not, maybe it's not even a case of imposter syndrome. It's the fact that they know that they, as I said, when I know I'm not qualified to talk about a topic, and I know I need training, and you're kind of put in that situation where, again, sometimes people just can't approach their senior management, or they can't approach their boss and be like, yes, I'm grateful for the promotion, but I'm not up to the task. I need training. And again, that's another difficult situation to approach. And it's about trying. Sometimes it's about having that confidence to admit it and go to senior management and be like, yes, I do appreciate this position, and I want to perform at my best in this position. But in order for me to do so, I'm going to need training on this. I'm going to need to delegate some of these duties that you have put on me to so-and-so. And if you want me to take on this extra responsibility, I'm going to need to dedicate the next 6 months on training to make sure that I can do it to a certain standard. And it's about having those conversations rather than, let's say, trying to do it all yourself, getting overwhelmed and not achieving those results. Sometimes it is all about having that difficult conversation that some people just, they feel they don't want the hassle of having the difficult conversation because they feel like they could be jeopardizing their new role or new promotion. But I again, this is my opinion, but like, if someone was to promote me into a higher role, then they must have a belief that I'm capable of that role to some extent. And if they are so quick to demote me because I say, I appreciate you bring me into this role and I want to perform my best, but in order for me to do so, I need this, this, and this. And they say, oh, you're causing too much hassle. I thought you'd pick it up quicker. I'm going to demote you again. That seems like a lot more hassle, and you're demoralizing that person back to the junior role. And is there like, are they going to perform to the same standard now that you've demoted them?
Not.
Absolutely not. Exactly. So it's about having that conversation and seeing exactly where you stand. And sometimes it's a matter of, let's say you could enjoy that junior manager position or wherever you were, and next thing you're promoted, and next thing you feel they're not treating you the same anymore now that they see that you're not of the same value in the senior position as you were in the junior position. But flipping the script a bit again, it's like, okay, I excel great in a junior managerial role, but I'm not appreciated here at senior management to do the training. And then they look elsewhere. And that way the company has already jeopardized a good junior manager, rather than giving them the training or the help that they needed or that they were looking for. I think it just goes back to work culture again, and maybe there's a matter of is there an element of work culture that brings on imposter syndrome, or that, let's say, that imposter syndrome kind of festers as a result of people being put into a bubble where they can't approach someone for help, or they feel that they can't approach someone for help even though they probably could, and they feel that they can't reach out to colleagues or their manager.
I think I mean that's no straightforward answer, I don't think, but I've seen it. I've worked for some amazing people, some really empowering bosses who they've just been so motivating. It's been, if they called me, I'd be there straight away, right? And I've seen these people, these CEOs, promote other people, okay, into positions that these people weren't capable of. But because they were it's ironic, because they were such a good boss, because they were such a great leader and so charismatic, that the people who've been promoted didn't want to question it, right? Didn't want to let them down because they're so good. These, I love this bloke, da 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 da. I don't want to let him down. Therefore, I'm not going to. If he's told me I'm good enough to do this, I must be good enough to do it. So I'm not going to question his judgment. On the other hand, I've worked for line managers and bosses who have had imposter syndrome themselves and who have tried to keep various members of their staff down for fear of being shown up. And in both cases, you're not going to go to them and say, can you help me? Can you nurture me? Can you lead me? Right? One, because like the first guy, the great boss, you're not going to go to him because you really don't want to upset him and make him think you've made a mistake, right? And you've got too much loyalty for him. And the other one, because you know that he's going to pin you to a wall, right? And he's going to make your life really difficult. So there's that dynamic going on. Plus the, it's like you go home, wait, I've been $5,000, $10,000 pay rise. They think I'm worth it. I'm not going to tell them I'm not worth it, right? And so you start leaning into it. And so it's almost like I say, everybody has to take a breath and say, how do we make this work properly? Because what's the current at the moment? Is it something like 3 times your annual wage it costs to re-employ someone? Like
by the end of the day, by the time we go through trainings and recruitment and everything.
Yeah. So if you've got that investment in a member of staff who you've promoted, right, allowing them to nurture a feeling of imposter syndrome is going to be a big, expensive mistake. Not to mention the knowledge they're walking away with, or you've just destroyed them for. So I think that from a company culture point of view, if you're going to have this thing of we're going to reward with promotion, for goodness sake, put the package around it that will properly help you get the best from your investment. Let's take it away from the personal thing now, right? A business is all about money. Okay, if you're investing, I don't know, let's say arbitrarily, let's say you're investing £50,000 a year in someone, and it's going to cost you £150,000 to replace them. It's got to be worth a few grand, making sure that they're going to be okay. That's what companies need to sort of lean into a lot more.
Yeah, I think that ties in very well with my next question, and that was around like, how does a company create that workplace culture to be more supportive of people when they do experience that imposter syndrome? I think we've already covered some of that already. Is about, I think the company has to come to that realization as well, that it's going to cost them more if their staff are feeling imposter syndrome, or if they feel incompetent in any way. It's a massive step forward for someone to come to their management and say, I don't feel up to the task, I need help with this. And that's coming from a perspective of where they care about their job, they care about the project that they're working on, and they care about that, seeing that project to completion. And they're approaching the manager to ask either for more time, for help from maybe another member of staff, or they're coming to the manager and saying, like, maybe I need more training, or maybe I need more maybe external validation from maybe benchmarking with another company, or let's say getting training, or maybe getting testing from an external company to come in, or let's say out of house testing. And they're coming from a perspective of they want to help bring this project to completion, whereas a manager sometimes takes the they kind of see one side of the story, and they just kind of blindside them and be like, okay, you're not good enough to finish this project, forget about it. You're not good enough for this project, I'll just give it to someone else. Whereas that person could have brought that project to 100% completion, and they were probably 50 to 60% of the way there. Whereas now you're starting back at zero, and again, that's expensive.
Or less than zero. Yeah.
Less than zero, exactly. Again, it's people looking at it at face value and being like, okay, if you're not good enough to complete the project, you're not worth it, or you're not worth the completing the project, rather than being like, how can I help this person go the last 40%, or how can I? It's like looking at the return of investment. And I think sometimes when it comes to training and kind of nurturing the talent within the company, they don't look at the return of investment that comes from training their staff and their workforce. They kind of look, I'm paying you a set wage per month, or this is your salary, and you either perform the task or you leave.
Yeah.
And they look at it at face value with that, rather than seeing this person has been working for the company for 20, 25 years. And yes, they went to college maybe 30 years ago, and now they might feel that they're outdated. We've brought in these new computer systems. They feel a bit outdated. Maybe they need a course on how to work with these computers.
Yeah.
And just by giving them a course, it might take them 6 weeks, it might take them 6 months. And next thing they realize, oh, instead of me hiring new staff, bringing in a new team of 10 people and train them up in how this company has been working for the past 20, 30 years, I just have to give someone a 6-month course and they're excelling.
Yeah. Totally.
It's about how do you shift how do you shift a workplace's culture to see that perspective? How can you implement that culture? I know it has to come from the top down. And it's about
to a degree, I would say it can be driven from the bottom up.
It doesn't have to, let's say, come from, it can be hard, well, from the bottom up. When it comes to training and stuff, it depends. It all depends on.
Of course, if you're talking about getting them to spend their money, it's got to come from the top down for sure.
Yes. Let's say the shift in perspective can, let's say, come from, let's say, employees might speak to their line manager and bring it up, but it has to come from the top down to change the workplace culture. It's hard. You can't bring it from the bottom up. Some people might speak up. Again, my opinion is that some people might speak up, and from the top down, they'll see them as loud people, and that wouldn't change the culture. Whereas if it comes from the top down, and let's say they're more transparent and they bring the vision to the company, that's what inspires the workforce.
Yeah, I think there's also a danger that actually it's got to be collaborative, and there's a danger that not everyone will buy into it. Okay, I know this from experience that when we set the mentoring thing up, not everyone buys into it. Some people just think of it as a bit namby-pamby. What's all this hand-holding malarkey about, right? That's fine. But if you've got a relationship with your manager, which hopefully most people should have or could nurture, unless the wheels have come right off, in which case you might as well not be there. Okay, if you've got a halfway decent relationship with your manager, and if let's say one of your employees came to you and said, look, Eugene, I like the way you work, I see that the way you work is the way I would like to work, would you mentor me? Are you going to say no? Okay. Likewise, if you promote someone and you say to that person, look, here's a job. I know it's what you've not done. It's not what you've done before. So I will find you, or I will myself mentor you for 6 months, 12 months, whatever it takes. Right? This goes beyond. That doesn't cost much, right? A couple of hours a week, maybe. But that's a personal thing, okay? And that goes beyond, and that just spreads, right? Because then you empower the person that you have put in, that you've promoted. They'll say, I like what you did there. I'm going to do that. And it just starts to spread by osmosis. And you can't introduce a company culture, you grow it. Okay. So there will be people at the top of the company who don't get it, don't see the need for it, right? This is a load of rubbish, da, da, da. And they've probably got their own imposter syndromes, which are causing that. Okay. Right. If I buy into this, they'll rumble me that I'm actually not the hard nut boss that I want everyone to think I am or whatever, right? But if you let it grow, if you again it is just like, you know, when you see the guy in the meeting room that you've been in who is quite clearly struggling, you just take it offline a little bit and you say, you know, how can let's start a conversation about how you can show me how to do this, or how we can work together, and what have you. It grows. It's a way of behavior rather than a rule that the company runs by, right? And you'll know that there have been some people you've met, maybe you've not worked for, but some people who you would follow across the Sahara if they asked you to, right? They're the sort of people that are going to get the best out of you, right? And the other people who, you know, you wouldn't lend them a fiver for lunch if they came without their wallet, right? Okay, they're not the people who are going to go grow the company culture. They're not the people who are going to help you grow as a person. Okay, and these you just kind of find the right people. And I know I've gone off track there a little bit from the imposter syndrome thing, but there's a reason behind it. It's because these people who nurture don't have imposter syndrome. They're not hiding behind anything because they're confident enough. Okay, so yeah, if you do see yourself as this person with imposter syndrome, this person shouting the odds in the meeting room or shunning any help, and you'll soon know, you will know deep down inside, if you question yourself, why did I behave like that? You'll know really whether you're happy doing it or not. And let's face it, inside everyone with imposter syndrome is probably, they're quite unhappy. Sorry, I felt I preached a little bit there.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. I think when it comes down to it at the end of the day, I think it has to come from the vision. The company's vision is basically where the culture grows.
Yeah.
And that has to come from the top down, because if there's any disconnect from the top down, that's where let's say toxicity kind of festers. Like if the message comes from the top down and let's say there's a change of management and they don't see eye to eye with the original vision of the company, and people then want to, let's say, approach and be open about challenges, and new management is like, not hearing any of it, get your work done. It takes a long time to grow a healthy work culture.
Oh yeah.
And you can destroy that almost overnight then by if you have a change of management that disconnects from that company culture. It's almost like it's trying to have the difficulty of growing a positive company culture. But again, I think that's what it's harder, let's say, especially in larger companies, because there's so many facets and so many branches. It's we're getting into very, very difficult territory here, going way off from imposter syndrome. So let's try and get back to imposter syndrome. And what would be your key takeaways to someone, whether they're feeling imposter syndrome, or maybe they're witnessing someone else who they may feel have imposter syndrome, or how do they approach overcoming their imposter syndrome? Again, you don't have to answer those. It's not a lightning round. You don't have to answer those questions, but what would be your key takeaways when it comes to imposter syndrome?
I think that that a lot of it comes down to, and this is personal experience, I guess. When you're deep in it, you can't see it. Okay, when you're in the maze, you can't find your way out. But at some point, there will be a moment, right? And maybe the light will just flicker on now and again, or whatever. Or you'll just know, I don't like myself right now. Okay, we get these feelings, I don't like myself. And trying to challenge that is obviously really difficult, because let's face it, if you've got imposter syndrome, you're not going to say to someone, I don't like who I am at the moment, right? You just carry on being a bit of an arse. So it's just taking time, I think, is to a bit of self-reflection. I know that, you'll find a lot of people, especially at the moment, there's sort of like a lot of talk of mindfulness or journaling or meditation, whatever it is, whatever works for you, is you take time out away from your situation, if you like. And that will just give you time to, you can't help but start to sort stuff out in your head. And then I think it's all about giving yourself permission. Okay, if you know that, even if you don't know why you're behaving in a certain way. Okay, now we've spoken around the 5 character traits, if you like. If anyone watching or listening to this has recognized that, oh yeah, I'm doing that, just ask yourself why you're doing it. Okay, just take a few minutes to ask yourself why you're doing it, and chew it over for a little while and see if, can you help yourself doing it? Maybe it's just something you're doing and it's like a knee-jerk reaction. Okay, from the other side, from the person who, if you see someone who appears to be exhibiting these symptoms, there's nothing you can do until they're ready. Because, here's the thing in life, no one's coming to your rescue, right? You have to rescue. You've got to put your own life jacket on. Okay, so until, if you see this is happening to somebody else, whatever it is, but this in particular, if you see this is happening to somebody else, you can't do a thing till they put their life jacket on. Okay, when they have, then you can help them. Okay, when you see someone, I don't know, you've just got to be there, right? You've just got to be there on the periphery. Like I say, ask the best, ask someone to help you, ask them for their advice, and it will soon start to come out. But you, like we were just saying, you nurture a relationship, right? And that is how you start to help somebody without helping them, if you get my drift. Yeah. On the other hand, if you do see that you're in a right old muddle here, you're behaving in a way you don't like, you walk out of the room, so, I can't believe I alienated everyone again today, or you just think, I really shouldn't be there, I don't know what I'm doing. If you know this, if you're consciously aware of it, well, first thing is give me a call, but find somebody who can help you, because these people are out there. Whether it is a mental health first aider at work, whether it is someone from HR that you trust, whether it's just a mate you want to go and have a beer with, right? There will always be someone. Okay, and they may not, as we both said, we're not experts in this, but there is always someone who will know someone who can say, oh, go and give these people a call. I think the most empowering thing anyone can ever say is, I need help, right? And that's a very short sentence, but it lasts for years, and it makes such a difference to people, right? And this is the key. This is why I coach, right? This is why I do what I do, is because people get to a point where they say, not really sure I like where I am right now. Okay, and this is just one of those. If you don't like where you are, it's voluntary. Move on out.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's another reason why with the podcast, especially with Give Yourself Some Leeway, it's all about raising the awareness, getting people to have that conversation. And if they need help, to have that courage to take action and get the help that they need, because that's the only way for them to get out of, if they're stuck in a rut, get out of that rut and to level up their lives, and to start that growth, that growth journey is by finally asking for that help that they need.
Yeah. And, you know, we've all asked for help for whatever reason at some time in our life, you know. Yeah, whether it's when you're a little kid, when you're playing or you just need help, putting something together, to when you're an adult, when you don't understand grown-up things like mortgages and things like that, you go and ask people for help, right? It's just what you do, right? So if you do find yourself blocked, then we've got this wonderful anonymous thing called the internet, right? Okay, it's full of bad advice, but it's full of help. Okay, and no one has to know who you are, right? No one. And I think people get a little bit caught up in what will people think if. Okay, when you go and you do voice your opinion, your feelings to a professional or someone who's trained or whatever, they're not judging you. And this is your biggest fear, right? Especially again with the imposter syndrome, your biggest fear is being judged, right? And the times that actually you will hear a coach or saying, doesn't matter what I think, right? Because it absolutely doesn't matter. The key is what you as a client think, right? I'm sitting here now talking to you, right? I've got no idea what you're thinking, right? You could be thinking, bloody hell, this guy's going on a bit now, right? I wish he'd shut up, whatever. But that doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter to me because I can't hear your thoughts. And this is exactly the same. If you go and you ask someone for help because you're a bit muddled, right? No one is going to judge you for asking, ever. It's that simple. You know? If you don't like who you are, if you don't like the way you're behaving, if you're scared, go and ask someone for help because they will help you. And if they say no, you've asked the wrong person, ask someone else. Right? There's how many billion people in the world? Someone's going to say yes.
So, Paul, if anyone does want to reach out to you for help, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Okay, so my website, all of my social media, Facebook, Instagram, are all just Paul Harris Coaching. Actually, LinkedIn is Paul Harris Coaching as well. So I'm very unimaginative when it comes to labeling places, or website paulharriscoaching.com. Find out a bit more about what I've done, how to get in touch, and what I can do to help. And here's the thing: this is something that I say to everybody. If I can't help you, and I will tell you if I can't help, right? I'm not in this just to empty your bank account, right? I'm not interested in that at all. If someone comes to me and I can't help them, I will work with them to find someone who can.
If you're feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, stuck in a rut, or running in circles all the time, trust me, I've been there too. The pursuit for peak performance, especially as a high achiever, is not about pushing harder all the time. It's about learning to work smarter, find balance, and reignite that spark that got you started in the first place. That's why I developed the Burnout Recovery Blueprint. Join me for 12 weeks to overcome your burnout. Let's break the burnout cycle and restore your vitality. Develop sustainable habits proven for peak performance when you need it most. Rediscover the meaning and purpose in the work that you do, and boost your productivity and impact without sacrificing your health. If you're ready to invest in your personal growth and success, let's break the burnout cycle together. Let's work together. Let's have that call. The link is in the show notes. Until next week, take care.